Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today we have my NFL Week 5 recap. So we're going to be recapping all 16 games, going over notable stats, scores. So let's dive right in. On Thursday Night Football, the Rams beat the Seahawks 26-17. In this game, Russell Wilson injured his finger, so that forced Seahawks backup quarterback Geno Smith into the game. He was playing well, and then he threw a game-sealing interception, which ended up costing the Seahawks the game. The Falcons beat the Jets across the pond in London. The final score of that game was 27-20. In the first half, it was all Falcons. They were dominating in the first half. They led by a score of 20-3 at the half. Then the Jets made a comeback. Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts had a breakout game, and although they were without top receiver Calvin Ridley, Pitts went 9 receptions, 119 yards, and a touchdown. And running back / receiver Cordero Patterson had another outstanding game, 14 carries for 54 yards. He was actually the team's leading rusher, and he had 7 receptions for 60 yards, the team's second leading receiver behind Pitts. The Packers beat the Bengals in overtime 25-22. So this game was very interesting because there was tons of missed field goals. It seemed like nobody wanted to win the game for some point. Mason Crosby, Packers kicker, missed 3 field goals, but then eventually made a 49-yarder, which ended up winning them the game in overtime. Both teams had chances to make the game-winning field goal. In overtime, the Bengals actually thought they made a field goal, but it was actually no good, so they were celebrating a missed field goal. The Vikings avoided an upset against the Lions with a walk-off field goal win. The Vikings beat the Lions 19-17, and this is the second time this season the Lions have lost on a last-second field goal by the score of 19-17. They also lost when Justin Tucker set the NFL record for a 66-yard field goal. Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson had an outstanding game, 7 receptions for 124 yards. The Steelers beat the Broncos 27-19. First-round pick Najee Harris had a great game, 23 carries for 122 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and he had 2 catches for 20 yards. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers destroyed the Dolphins 45-17. Brady had an amazing game. He went 30 of 41 for 411 yards and 5 touchdowns. And Buccaneers wide receivers Mike Evans and Antonio Brown both had outstanding games. Antonio Brown went 7 catches, 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Mike Evans 6 receptions, 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Saints beat the Washington football team 33-22. And James Winston and Marquez Callaway connected on a Hail Mary at the end of the first half. The Eagles beat the Panthers 21-18. Sam Darnold had an awful game. He went 21 of 37 for 177 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. Chuba Hubbard had a good game filling in for Christian McCaffrey. He was 24 carries for 101 yards and 5 catches for 33 yards. The Titans dominated against the Jaguars 37-19. Both running backs had great days. James Robinson had 18 carries for 149 yards and a touchdown, and Derrick Henry had 29 rushes for 130 yards and a touchdown. 3 touchdowns, sorry. The Patriots avoided an upset with a 25-22 win over the Texans. Mac Jones had a good game, 23 for 30, 23 of 30 with a touchdown and a pick. The Bears beat the Raiders 20-9. Justin Fields threw his first NFL touchdown pass. Fields went 12 for 20 for 111 yards and a touchdown, and he had 3 carries for 4 yards. So because Justin Fields is such a dual-threat quarterback, the Bears really need to use his legs more. Because we already know he's a pretty good passer, but he's an elite rushing quarterback. So the Bears need to use his legs more. Like more design runs, read options, stuff like that. Similar to how the Ravens use Lamar Jackson. The Cowboys dominated against the Giants 44-20. This was an injury-filled week for the Giants. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and Kenny Golladay all left with injuries, and they were already without wide receivers Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton. Rookie wide receiver Kadarius Toney had a breakout game, 10 receptions for 190 yards, and he was their best offensive weapon after Barkley, Golladay, and Jones all went down, because, as I said, they were without Shepard and Slayton. However, Toney did get ejected for throwing a punch after he was shoved down at the end of the play. The Cardinals beat the 49ers to remain the NFL's only undefeated team. They won 17-10. Third overall pick Trey Lance he was the 49ers starting quarterback because Garoppolo was injured, and in his debut as a starter, he went 15 of 29, 192 yards and an interception, and he ran the ball 16 times for 89 yards. So as you can tell by those numbers, he's a great dual threat quarterback and has tons of rushing upside, just like Justin Fields. But the 49ers actually use his rushing ability, unlike the Bears. Deebo Samuel had a good game, but not as good as last week. Samuel went 3 receptions for 58 yards, and he had 1 rush for 13 yards and a touchdown. The Chargers beat the Browns 47-42 in an early game of the year candidate. In this game, there was 1,024 total yards of offense. Justin Herbert had an amazing game. He had 26 of 43, 398 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Austin Eckler also had an outstanding game. He had 17 carries for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 5 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. And on one of Austin Eckler's touchdowns, the Browns pushed him into the end zone. They weren't trying to push him into the end zone, but like when you look at the video, it actually does seem like they're trying to, but they really didn't want to because it ended up being the game-winning score. And wide receiver Mike Williams also had a amazing game, 8 receptions, 165 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Buffalo Bills beat the Kansas City Chiefs 38-20 in a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game. Patrick Mahomes threw 2 interceptions in this game, matching his total for last year with 6. And he's already got 6 in 5 games. Both quarterbacks led their respective teams in rushing yards. Josh Allen had 11 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown, and Mahomes had 8 carries for 61 yards. Both quarterbacks had good games passing the ball too. Allen went 15 of 26 for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Mahomes went 33 of 54 for 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And on Monday Night Football, the Ravens came back to beat the Colts. So the Ravens were down 10-3 at the half, and they were down 16 to start the 4th quarter. Lamar Jackson then led them back into the game. He had one of his best games in his career. He was 37 of 43, 442 yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air, and he had 14 carries for 62 yards. Mark Andrews, the Ravens tight end, had an outstanding game, 11 receptions for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Marquise Brown, Jackson and Brown connected on the game-winning touchdown in overtime. Brown was 9 receptions, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And just a fun fact about Lamar Jackson, so far this season he has more total yards than 18 NFL teams, so that is a crazy stat. And one of the teams he has more yards than is the Green Bay Packers. So that's it for this video. Like, subscribe, comment, and go check out Sports News episode 58 for the latest NFL injury updates. Like, subscribe, comment, and go check out Sports News episode 58 for injury updates.